So I want to talk about what is in an annotation for project number 2. So remember, an annotation in your annotated bibliography, that's the second part of the project. The 500-word synthesis essay is the first. The annotation is the second. Annotations are the second and arguably the larger portion of the project. Each of your 8 sources needs to have an annotation. Each annotation has the 4 things. It has an MLA citation, a summary of the work, an evaluation of the work, and a contextualization. So first of all, the citation, right? The Purdue OWL The Purdue Online Writing Lab helps you do this. There's also a video here in the paper, one of the paper 2 folders that helps you with the citation. So make sure you watch that video. So it should be in MLA format. The next part is probably the easiest thing. The paragraph of information below the citation, I like to think about in thirds. So 1/3 of this should be the summary. Again, 1/3. So the summary should take the book, the article, the internet site, and it should summarize the article, including things like the thesis, the purpose, the major supporting points, any highlights from the source. So I tell students, anything that someone who hasn't read the article would need to know to get the gist of it. This is probably the simplest part of annotations. Again, 1/3. I often get students that write so much on the summary that these next 2 parts, they give short shrift to. And that's what will end up hurting your grade. The next part is the evaluation. So I want you to include at least one of the following points as a claim. This source is credible because, right? The evaluation says that. And you can even be that clear in your annotation. This source is credible because. Is it because it has a credible author, right? This is where you go to Google and you look up the author's credentials. Are they somebody who has been publishing on your topic for years? Great, say that. This source is credible because John Smith is a Harvard professor who has been publishing on, drug crime in America for 20 years, period. His other titles include and list them off with dates, right? Those are 2 clear sentences that say one of the reasons why this source is credible. You can say something about the reputation of the place of publication, because also this article is published in the New York Times, which is, arguably one of the most popular news outlets out there. They publish credible stuff, right? I'm not being nearly as succinct as you should, right? Now, just saying something alone about the place of publication it doesn't have as much weight as looking up authors' credentials that are overwhelmingly awesome, right? But maybe the author's credentials are actually lackluster. So maybe looking up the author's credentials, saying something about, maybe it's somebody who's a Harvard professor, they don't have any previous research on the subject. So maybe you have to say something about the author's credentials and the place of publication. Maybe those 2 together make one really awesome claim that this is a credible source, right? And that's something to keep in mind is most of you, even though I said that you use one, you probably are going to have to use a combo. And why do I say that? Because a lot of times you get to one of these things, like say maybe it's the study, right? You're looking up a scientific article and the way that they used so much control in the study shows that the data is really overwhelming, right? So you want to explain that this source is credible because the data here and the way it's collected and the care that the scientists went to collect the data is actually really sound, right? You probably also want to include information about their credentials, okay? So although I want you to at minimum, use one of these following things, using more than one of them is not a bad thing, right? Remember the rule of thirds. So this is just 1/3 of the annotation. If your annotation ends up being 6 sentences, you should write 2 sentences on the evaluation. Now, for the web sources, so say you're looking at a trans woman's blog about how they've transitioned into being a woman, and you're really looking at it in terms of this is like somebody in the community. This isn't a scientist. They don't have publication credentials, but they kind of had street cred. Like this person has personal experience living the life that you're discussing or doing the thing or engaging in the system that you guys that you're looking at. They have credibility, but perhaps their credibility doesn't come from traditional credibility. They're not a professor, they're not a writer, this isn't the New York Times, they didn't perform a double-blind research study, but they have credibility because their blog has lived experience. So you'll want to be able to explain that, okay? And so I say this 4th point right here, right? It's kind of limited for that reason. It's helping you deal with the web sources that don't always have credibility right away. If you're not looking up on a website that already has credibility, if you're looking up someone's blog, which I encourage you to do to get these stakeholder positions, if you're looking up on someone's blog what to say and what to do and what this lived experience puts out there, right? Then you're gonna have to talk about how and why you think it's credible. And it's credible because of this lived experience component that you can't get from these other sources. Just make sure that you're clearly saying that. Now here's the red flag. You get to the source, it's 10 years old. Over 10 years old. It's from 2000. You need to explain why it is still credible. And just saying it's still credible because the information is still valid, right? What does that mean? I'll have students who cite scientific studies about cloning from 15 years ago, and they'll say the research is still valid. And I'm like, in what way? You mean they haven't put together, new technology in cloning or this study? Most of the time, something that's over 10 years old it's because it's groundbreaking, right? You want to cite, you're doing research on abortion rights, and you want to cite Roe versus Wade because it's groundbreaking. It is the Supreme Court case that has paved the way for legalizing abortion in the United States. I get that. And you need to explain that. That's why you're citing it. And this is why it's credible. Is that certainly there's been new data and research and arguments out there about abortion since then, but this is the most groundbreaking, earth-shattering case. Totally fine. So these 2 points, the evaluation and then the contextualization, in both of these points you're making claims. In the evaluation, you're making claims that this source is credible for the following reasons. And make sure those claims are specific and make sure those claims are backed up with evidence. So if you say this source is credible because the author is credible, right? It's not specific enough. And then back it up with evidence. Be more specific. Why is this author credible? And what evidence do you have for that? The way I could fix that is saying the author is credible because they're a longtime writer for the New York Times. And the evidence I have backing that up is they've published on this subject for 20 years, and some of their titles include the following. And I would cite the different titles of the New York Times articles. So that's what you need to do for the evaluation. Contextualization. Again, a third of your annotation needs to be this. 1/3, right? Sorry, my drawing here is really bad. 1/3. So if you write 3 sentences on your summary and 3 on your evaluation, 3 on your contextualization. So the major claim you need to make here is that you've researched your topic as intersectional. So tell us how the source functions to present your topic as intersectional. This might just be that this holds one piece of this puzzle. No one source will show all of the different social locations and positions you're trying to uncover. This one might give you 2 of those positions, and you need to explain what these positions are, how they help fit into this piece of the puzzle. So I ask you to answer the question, what does this source help you present? What information does it have? What viewpoint, what social location does this source provide that helps you see or helps you illustrate your topic as intersectional? And once again, this is a claim. This section of the annotation will illustrate to me that each of your sources serves a function in illustrating your topic as intersectional. So you might word this claim, and most likely it'll be multi-sentenced. Because this source gives me insight into X, I am able to see clearer how the issue can be a problem for Black trans women. Thus, this source provides me with insight into how Black trans women experience bathrooms, right? That's how I might word this, okay? So again, at least a third of the annotations. So in the annotations, these are some do's. Make claims. Provide information and specifics. Make sure you have the best sources, the most credible, and the ones that help you illustrate your topics as intersectional. If you can't argue that this source is credible, or if it doesn't help you illustrate your topic as intersectional, what is it doing on this annotated bibliography? That's something you have to ask for yourself. I also want you to make sure that you check your MLA citations against the formula on the Purdue OWL website, and then I want you to work on the format of your paper. Heading, title, double space, 1-inch margins, hanging indent for citations. Don't be vague, right? This source is credible because of the information. Don't always trust the library or EasyBib to have the correct citation format. If you copied and pasted it from somewhere, make sure you transfer that to, make sure you compare that with what's listed on the MLA citation list. And finally, don't assume that each source will give you a complete intersectional picture of your topic. As a researcher, you're to find sources that piece this picture together. Each source should serve its function, but no one source will give you everything. All right, good luck.